everyone, welcome to Random Act of Squirrel. Today is Act 24, a Random Act of Cinema / Adventures with Digital Girl crossover, the Duck Dynasty tour, and the blind review. So while I was following Digital Girl down to Miami, on the way back we realized, as mentioned on 9 - 3 - Crash, we kind of looked at the map and realized that in some ways it was the closest we were probably ever going to be to Louisiana and northeast Louisiana, which is where the Duck Dynasty headquarters, or Duck Commander is what it's called, was. And she's always had a soft spot for the Duck Dynasty show and some of that kind of world, so we wandered off there. Also about the same time, the movie The Blind, which is about the years kind of after Phil and Kay got married and graduated from high school, and then kind of where he got his life straightened out, got released, so she was curious about that too. So we drove, as I said before, with 9 - 3 - Crash, all through Florida, which is like 12 hours, and kind of mind-blowing that it took that long. But yeah, and as I said earlier, the other part that's fascinating about Florida, which still kind of blows my mind, is like every 2 to 3 hours, it was a different kind of culture. And by the time you got from like Miami, which was its own sort of party and palm trees and that kind of culture, you get all the way over to Pensacola, and it's more marshy, it's much more reserved, and kind of just an entirely different feel to it. Like the trees are different, the world moves different, that kind of thing, which is very, very fascinating. Then we did our little jump through Alabama, stayed where Brett Favre stays, and then we, on the next day, drove to West Monroe, Louisiana, and we saw the tour, they have a full tour in the headquarters of Duck Dynasty. And I was kind of surprised because I thought they were an overnight sensation, but the reality is that they were like a 40-year overnight sensation, which that part kind of surprised me because I knew they were around, and I don't know much about most outdoor stuff. I mean, this hat and camo is about as close as I probably get for being outdoorsy. And so Phil Robertson started his Duck Dynasty in a boat in a shed, making duck calls in 1972. And he was kind of just working to pay the bills, and he was doing what he does, catching stuff out in the woods, that sort of thing. In 1987, through necessity and sort of inspiration, he did something that hadn't been done in the outdoor industry before all that much, and he started doing the Duckman videos. And during the Duckman videos, he would have someone go out with a camera and record as he was hunting, and he would just kind of talk over it, explain the stuff. And it was a huge thing in the hunting industry because no one had really taken that level of intimacy to really show you what it was like to really be in the blind and actually be hunting the ducks and that kind of stuff. And they still make a fair amount of those. They come out, I think they come out solely as DVD. They were direct to video. And then along the way, Outdoor Channel, more channels got on there. In 2009, they did a series called Duck Commander. And then in 2010, they did something called Buck Commander, and that's still going. It started off with Chipper Jones and a couple baseball players. Chipper Jones left, the ball players retired, they became kind of the heart of it. And then along the way, they also acquired the country stars, Jason Aldean and Luke Bryan, to kind of fill out the cast. And that's been going on, I think, 10, 11, 12 seasons since 2010. And that, I think, is on Outdoor Channel. We'll get back to that in a moment. Then 2012, you have when they kind of blew up in the world, finally knew who he was, and whether you liked it or not, Duck Dynasty became a thing, and the Robertson family became a thing that, whether you wanted to know about them or not, in 2012, they were huge. And the show saw somewhere looking through Wikipedia, 7 seasons. Other places I saw 5. I'm not exactly sure how many, but for 5 or 6 years, they were everywhere, and they were A&E's bread and butter. After the show ended, they started doing a bunch of books, they did some podcasts, they explored other media, speaking circuits, that kind of stuff. In the Christian stuff, they became sort of cameo things where they would fill in roles on TVs and movies to kind of help spike up and get people to go to those. And then in 2023, that's when they released the movie The Blind. I don't know what the budget that they did for filming. And then they had little scenes for each area. So like they kind of show the house that Kay grew up in, they show the house that Phil grew up in, talked a little bit about his history, talked a little about her history, how they met, where like when they started the company, that kind of stuff. Showed images like when they first started the company, different steps along the way when they he's doing whatever he can to make it. And then his son picks it up and blows it up into a multi-million dollar industry. And it has to be kind of mind blowing. You could tell they were really thinking the blind was going to be a big thing because they added 2 or 3 rooms, a couple of the sets in there. And one of the things away when we finally got the chance to watch the blind was we purchased it streaming because at that point when we got back and everything, it was already left the theaters. it starts off with a statement saying, this is a true story. And I was immediately curious because most movies start off saying, based on a true story or based on true events. And it starts off, this is a true story. And it starts off with a sort of, I think about 80, so it's in the 80s. So he'd been running his duck blind for about, or been running Duck Commander for about 10 years or so. And this guy looks like a younger version of Phil Robertson is telling a story of how he became Phil Robertson. And first of all, I was impressed by just the storytelling, because I didn't expect kind of a two-tier story that's going on. And maybe that's giving away too much. I don't want to give too much on the movie itself. I think the movie's worth seeing. But I was really surprised by, like, the B movie. It's B budget, but you could tell they've tried really hard to make everything look good and look right and be true. And I think it's easy to forget when you get some of these people, once they make their money, that they started off sort of rough and broken, and they had to build themselves up, and the little sacrifices they had to make to get to that point. And I think it's easy to look at a rich person or someone whose first generation income made it, and be like, yeah, well, you had it easy. And you don't always realize everything they went through. And I think that's a huge part of what Phil, especially, because he realized what he was after he got out of high school and before he got his life straightened out with God, how much of a train wreck that he was. And he releases this movie that shows just how far he fell, how much he almost lost, and how grateful he is to have it all come back again. And there's probably more reviews out here that can give you all the plot synopsis. I'll tell you, go see it. If the story's compelling, if you like a redemption story, I'm still blown away by the fact that he allowed all of this dirt to be out there. If you like Duck Dynasty, I will forewarn you, this movie gets heavy, so it's not one for kids. It doesn't swear, you're not going to see sex, drugs, rock and roll. But there is substance there, and it's a heartbreak kind of story because it's a man falling and then realizing where he came from. That's the part that really impressed me, was they showed a lot of the gravity of just how broken he had become and how much damage he was doing and how much he had to actually redeem himself. Let's see here. Phil was played by Aaron Van Andrian, Vonandrian, and Kay was played by Amelia Eve. I thought she did a phenomenal job. I liked what he did, but I really thought she did an amazing job. In fact, I think a lot of the supporting people almost kind of out-acted the guy who played Phil. One of the nuances that was interesting is he really wanted to show you just how he's kind of laying it all out. And this is probably the reference that one of the most famous theological books and philosophical books was is called Confessions by St. Augustine. And St. Augustine, who was a bishop in like 3rd century Hippo, which I think is like in Algeria or Northern Africa, he really dove deep into like that juicy stuff that philosophy and religion wanted to talk about. But instead of him glorifying himself, he often talked about his worst moments and then reflected on those worst moments and said, what caused me to fall to those points? Why did I fall for something so cheaply? And Phil Robertson and the movie The Blind very much talks about how he just would keep falling, but there'd be this grace that was keeping him up. And he would keep falling and falling and falling until it took the courage of a preacher to stand up and basically call his bluff, and for him to wake up and realize that he had nothing. And it is a powerful movie. I do recommend it. There we are. And I guess I'm being a little vague because if you are slightly interested, I don't want to wreck it. And if you're not going to see it, there's a lot of other reviews that can give you every point-by-point detail. On the way home, we heard a review. We actually heard both, like, I don't know, it was a podcast that Digital Girl found talking about um, the movie, and Phil Robertson was on there, is completely candid. So, yep, this stuff happened. It's all true. And then you watch it and realize just how vulnerable he was to make a permanent movie. And you think about it, he had so many stories he could tell about how he rose up, but he chose to tell the story about how he fell. As a side note, they have fun with the fact that he was actually the... Oh, I hate it when I do this. You can play the trivia on this later. It's the guy who's Terry Bradshaw. There we go. Terry Bradshaw was actually his backup when he was a quarterback at LSU. It's just he decided he wasn't interested in football. He'd rather go hunting and fishing. So it's crazy to think about it for that. And where's this? This is gonna be all scrunched. I apologize. I was gonna do some phenomenal review on the tour. I would say it's not Disneyland. But it's not the world's biggest ball of twine. It's a cool thing if you like those things to see kind of the heart and soul of what drove it. If you don't care, I don't think it's going to win you over. But if you like the stuff, it's kind of cool to see the props that made the thing that you liked. As far as the movie goes, for the blind, there we go. Actual review is probably about 6.5. It hits all the notes right. It does what you need to. If it's your niche, you're going to love it a little bit more. If it's not going to do anything that's going to break your heart. I think if you're skeptical of the Robertsons and what they stand for and things like that, it might be worth the watch because he's really exposing him at his lowest and how he is so grateful by ultimately, I mean, his thing is say God first and then the family that took him back. Digital Girl gives it like 9 out of 10. She loves this thing. She loves the heart-wrenching quality of it. She loves the honesty of it, all that kind of thing. I'm going to put it closer to 8 out of 10 for me personally. And then, as a more humorous side note, so we bought one of these because we didn't know we could make our own. And then, while we were doing the tour, I got one and she got one. And then one of the last things, they have Jace on there, and he shows you how to make a duck call. So I made my duck call, and she made a duck call. I thought we had to return them, but we got to keep them, so we had 3 duck calls. And one of the things she thought be awesome is Digital Girl gave the duck call to her father, and her father absolutely loved it. Her brother and her mom, not so much, but he thought it was pretty awesome. I think he scared all the ducks away, to be completely honest. But overall, that was fun. Thank you for your time. If you liked what you saw, give it a like. If you have any cool comments, maybe you've gone to the Duck Commander place and things like that, Duck Commander, or seen the movie, go ahead and put your comment. Tell me what you think. Otherwise, if you like what you're seeing, hit the subscribe. I noticed there's one other subscribe, so that was fantastic. Otherwise, thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day.